Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about the 2025 New York City mayoral election and an interesting trend that I've been noticing in this race. So for starters, an article came out that showed a pro-Eric Adams commission poll shows that the mayor trailing Andrew Cuomo by double digits, but Mamdani is still beating them both in this poll. A stunning poll aimed at drumming up support for Mayor Eric Adams' re-election bid has still the incumbent trailing ex-governor Andrew Cuomo by double digits as the pair jockey to take on socialist Zohran Mamdani. The 33-year-old Queens State Assemblyman, who shockingly trounced Cuomo in the Democratic primary last month, leads the ex-governor and Adams by double digits, himself with 41% of the vote in a theoretical general election, while Cuomo garners 26% and his owner takes home 16%, their survey said. Both Cuomo and Adams are still listed as running as independents in November. If both Cuomo and Adams are in the race anywhere near the election, Mamdani can go pick out drapes for a Gracie mansion, said Stephen Grace of Gotham Polling and Analytics. It's surprising. The poll surveyed a little more than 1,000 voters between June 30th and July 2nd, just days after Adams formally kicked off his re-election bid on an independent line and the stunning Democratic primary win for Mamdani. The primary upset is left moderate Dems and those in the business community scrambling to figure out which of the remaining moderate candidates they can line up behind to challenge the upstart socialist. Adams and Cuomo have both been making their cases to prominent New Yorkers that they are the only one who can take down Mamdani. On Thursday morning, Adams nabbed the support of billionaire Bill Ackman, who urged Cuomo to drop out. A day earlier, Reverend Al Sharpton made a similar call, telling Cuomo to throw in the towel. But even with the new poll being heavily skewed when surveying voters to try to help boost Adams' numbers and tarnish others, the mayor failed to garner much support, much to the chagrin of his campaign. One of the questions read, "Some people believe Andrew Cuomo's re-entry into politics shows strength and experience, while others believe it reflects old political habits and unresolved controversies. Which comes closest to your view?" Another asked the potential voter if they were concerned about Mamdani for various reasons, such as his too extreme policies, support for defunding the police, lack of experience, or focus on symbolic or foreign issues, not local problems. Graves pointed out that Mamdani largely benefits from the fractured moderate vote being split among Adams and Cuomo, as well as GOP nominee Curtis Sliwa, who came in with just under 10% of support. If Adams or Cuomo drops out, the other has a chance, but based on this, Cuomo is the better chance, said Graves, highlighting Adams' high level of hard-no voters. According to the poll, 51% of voters said they would never vote for Eric Adams, while Cuomo came in at 12%, lower at 39%. Around 46% of voters, or 12% less, 39. Around 46% of voters fell into the never Mamdani category. Adams and Cuomo head into the general election with years of political baggage, with the mayor's first term being dominated by federal raids and of his top officials and historical indictment. And then Andrew Cuomo, we don't have to get into all that. We've covered that in depth, how much Cuomo has faced. This is very interesting because in the early polling that shows so far, there's been a very strong united effort among many New York Democrats and independents trying to stop Zohran Mamdani from winning the general election in November. Because when you look at past elections, I have 2021 and 2017 pulled up. When it was Eric Adams versus Curtis Sliwa, Adams won in a blowout, 67.4%. Sliwa got 27.9%. The only county that went Republican was Richmond County. This is where Staten Island is. Sliwa won here. But every other borough of New York City, or I should say borough of New York City and counties, all went heavily Democratic as expected. 2017 was not really any difference. This was Bill de Blasio versus Malotakis, the Republican. Same thing. Staten Island went red. Everything else went blue without too much of a surprise. However, this time around is an interesting situation because Zohran Mamdani shocked many in the political establishment and political predictors, including myself, who, in my final prediction, I had Cuomo defeating Mamdani by roughly about 6 or 7 points, I think it was. And even then, at the time, I thought I was more on the side of giving Mamdani too much credit than many other political predictors who had Cuomo winning by double digits and some by even more than 15 points. But Mamdani shocked all of us and won a very impressive Democratic primary. But now, the question is for the general election, a lot of Democrats and independents that don't support Zohran Mamdani are trying to coalesce around one candidate to take him on. And right now, both current Mayor Eric Adams, who is running as an independent, and Andrew Cuomo, who's also on the ballot as an independent. I want to get the proper party here. The Working Families Party currently has, I believe, Andrew Cuomo under it right now. This could get very interesting here because whoever has the Democratic initial, the Democratic D next to their name, is a very big advantage in New York City. New York City is one of the most Democratic areas in the United States. So Zohran Mamdani has a very big advantage on that regard. However, Andrew Cuomo, being on a third party in these early polls, have started out with a very high floor of support. The most recent Slingshot Strategies poll, which does not include partisan affiliation or candidates, showed Mamdani with a 10-point lead over Andrew Cuomo, 35% to 25%. Eric Adams trails behind both of them at 11%, while Republican Curtis Sliwa has 14%. And I'll be getting more into Sliwa's role in this in just one second as well. In the Gotham Polling Analytics poll, which I was just going over on that article, Zohran Mamdani has 41%, Cuomo has 26%, Adams has 16%. And then Sliwa has about 10% or less in that poll. An American Pulse research poll from back towards the end of June and beginning of July showed Mamdani at 35%, Cuomo at 29%, Adams at 14%, Sliwa at 16%. And then a Hoden strategy group from June 25th showed that in a matchup of Mamdani versus Sliwa versus Adams versus Cuomo, the race starts out tied 39-39 between Mamdani and Cuomo, while Adams is at 13, Sliwa is at 7. In a poll a head-to-head of just Mamdani versus Adams, Mamdani wins by 15 points, 46-31. In a matchup of Mamdani versus Sliwa versus Cuomo, in this one, Cuomo wins 44-40. And I can go over Manhattan and Emerson's poll as well in just one moment, but again, the trend here has been very consistent. When it's Mamdani at first place, which he has been in every single poll without no mistake, if the election were held today, I do expect Mamdani is more likely to win than not. Andrew Cuomo in every single poll has been the top second choice among many in New York City, among Democrats, independents, and maybe even some Republicans who feel he gives them the best chance at stopping Zohran Mamdani for winning. When you look at these polls so far, it's very clear independent Mayor Eric Adams has no chance at winning this general election. He's polling in the third and even fourth place at times, even though now the best chance at stopping Zohran Mamdani is having a third party, technically independent or third party candidate win. It's not Eric Adams. All Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo are doing at this point is splitting their respective vote and stopping any chance at beating Zohran Mamdani. Right now, in the early polls, Cuomo's trailing Mamdani by about 5 to 10 points. He's getting close on his own, and there's still a decent amount of undecided vote left. But Adams, if he were not in this race, almost for sure gives Cuomo a strong chance at winning this race. But like the article mentioned, and this Honen Strategy Group poll also shows, is there is a lot more voters that will not consider voting for Eric Adams after 4 years of having him as mayor of New York City, who are very disgruntled and disgusted with how Adams has run the city. They will not vote for him even to stop Zohran Mamdani. Whereas Andrew Cuomo, despite all of his scandals as governor, which in all likelihood, in addition to Mamdani being a very strong candidate, I'm sure Cuomo's past scandals played a very large role in that primary, stopped him from becoming the Democratic nominee. Cuomo still has a much better chance at defeating Mamdani than Eric Adams does. So there's a lot more Never Adams voters than Never Mamdani and Never Cuomo voters. Which means the obvious solution here is, at least to me according to the early polls, if Democrats want to unite around one candidate to stop Zohran Mamdani, or independents want to unite around one candidate to stop Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo is leading in all these polls and presents them the best opportunity at doing so. But Eric Adams and Curtis Sliwa remaining in this race are taking away any potential of stopping Zohran Mamdani, because right now every single poll has made it very clear only Andrew Cuomo is the only independent candidate that has an actual chance at stopping Zohran Mamdani. But as long as Adams and Sliwa remain on the ballot, it's very unlikely Cuomo is going to be able to defeat Mamdani because the vote is going to be split up. Sliwa, Adams, and Cuomo will all represent the split Mamdani vote. And unlike New York City, which the Democratic primary was ranked choice voting, I don't believe the general election is going to be ranked choice voting in New York City in the general election. So this could go, whoever gets the most votes wins. And in this case, Zohran Mamdani, and again, if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments below on that. But if this just goes, whoever gets the most votes wins, in this matchup of this Mamdani, Sliwa, Adams, Cuomo election, Mamdani is going to win because the anti-Mamdani vote is too split among the three candidates. So when you read reports about Adams and Cuomo fighting over who should stay in the race and who should drop out, and neither one wanting to drop out, the reality is Cuomo has the better chance at defeating Mamdani, but Adams is being adamant that he believes he's the independent candidate that could best beat Mamdani, even though the early polling data shows he has absolutely zero chance in doing so. And Adams is just as unpopular, if not more unpopular, among anti-Mamdani voters as Mamdani is himself. So Adams does not really have a chance here. And as crazy as it sounds, after seeing Cuomo just a few weeks ago get blown out in that Democratic primary rather shockingly, he presents the best alternative that could win a general election to Zohran Mamdani in New York City, which is really fascinating. As for Curtis Sliwa's part, the Republican, I mean, look, it's New York City. No Republican in modern times has a real possibility of becoming mayor of New York City. And at this point, Sliwa is just really doing the same thing as Adams, which is splitting the anti-Zohran Mamdani vote. I think we're going to see this election develop over recent months. This is not going to be a conventional election in New York City of Republican, Democrat. This is going to be a Zohran Mamdani Democrat and anti-Zohran Mamdani Republican, Independent, Democrat electorate. Whether people in New York want to have Mamdani as the mayor with all of his policies he's proposed, a lot of them being coined as socialist and such policies, do New York City voters want to see that be the case? And the early polling shows right now, if all the voters for Sliwa and Adams coalesce around Cuomo, there is more than enough support for Cuomo to defeat Mamdani. But the same cannot be said if all the vote coalesced around Eric Adams. It just doesn't add up. There's enough voters that are so disgruntled with Eric Adams that even if they don't like Mamdani, they would rather vote for him than vote for Eric Adams. Again, in this matchup, 46% for Mamdani, 39% when Cuomo and Sliwa and Adams are in this race. For Cuomo versus Mamdani, it's 44-40. Mamdani goes up to 46% when it's Mamdani versus Adams. That just really underscores how unpopular Eric Adams is with a lot of New Yorkers. So the simple reality here is, looking at the numbers, if the Democrats, Independents, and Republicans of New York City want to have a mayor not named Zohran Mamdani come Election Day in November, their best bet electorally is Andrew Cuomo. But whether Curtis Sliwa and Eric Adams decide to get out of this race and throw their support behind Cuomo to stop Mamdani, I, at this point, would probably bet on that not happening, especially from Sliwa. Sliwa's shown no interest in getting out of this race. Neither has Eric Adams. As he is the incumbent mayor, he probably does not want to get out of this race either. But the simple reality is Andrew Cuomo is the only candidate that can currently stop Zohran Mamdani or maybe even get it close. Sliwa and Adams are just going to get blown out in this election. If Cuomo does drop out of this race and throws his support behind Adams, it's possible maybe Adams does a little bit better than this poll, but the only poll that has that scenario right now shows Mamdani gaining more support, and that would likely be a very good thing for Mamdani having to face Adams in the general election instead of Cuomo. So this is very fascinating. This is not something I was really thinking about talking about come the primary night where Mamdani won a shocking victory against Cuomo, but it's possible we may get a Mamdani-Cuomo rematch in November where we'll see if it ends up being the same again, or maybe Andrew Cuomo in a less, I would say, farther left electorate gives Cuomo a better chance of winning. But if Adams and Sliwa drops out, Cuomo has a very strong chance. If it remains the way it is now, then Zohran Mamdani is likely going to become the next mayor of New York City, and that's where things stand on that front. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave your thoughts down below. Do you think Cuomo in a 1v1 against Mamdani could win? Is Sliwa and Adams hurting Cuomo's chances or any other chances at beating Mamdani? Leave all your thoughts down below. Make sure to like and subscribe as well as I post more videos like this one going forward. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about the 2026 North Carolina Senate race where former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper is apparently leaning toward entering the North Carolina Senate race and a potential Trump showdown. So just for transparency here, I'm recording this video on Friday, July 11th. This will be coming out a few days later. If Cooper announced in the meantime from now till then, obviously I will not know about it at the time of this recording, but I will be doing a video in the future updating that. So if this news breaks, I will be doing that. But as of the time I'm recording this, he has not yet officially joined the race. But there are rumors that Roy Cooper, the former North Carolina Democratic governor, are getting close to him entering the race. The field is essentially frozen right now until Cooper and President Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, decide if they want to be their party's nominees. In their own way, they both have, quote, the right of first refusal in their party's primaries. Governor Cooper continues to strongly consider a run for the U.S. Senate and will decide in the coming weeks, said Morgan Jackson, Cooper's top political advisor. I'm considering it, Laura Trump said on her Fox News radio show on Monday. This is all kind of fresh from the past 24 hours for me, she said. North Carolina is my home state. It's where I was born and raised, and it made me the person I am today. So if you're unfamiliar with the backstory here, Republican incumbent Senator Thom Tillis made an announcement a few weeks ago now, or at the time you were seeing this, probably last week for me, that he would not be running again for a third term after him and President Trump were sparring on the One Big Beautiful Bill, and Tillis is voicing his disagreements and disgruntledness with the bill. He said, in Washington over the last few years, it's become increasingly evident that leaders who are willing to embrace bipartisanship, compromise, and demonstrate independent thinking are becoming an endangered species. Now, one longtime Senate Democratic donor told Axios they expect Cooper to hop in the race after Tillis' retirement. Even before his announcement, however, Democrats viewed North Carolina as their best opportunity to chip away at the GOP's 3-seat Senate majority in the 2026 midterms. Tillis had shown a willingness on a few issues to buck the president, feeding suspicions in the MAGA base that he wasn't on Team Trump, including in 2023 when the state party formally censured him. Laura Trump, a former RNC vice chair, could rely on the president to clear the field and avoid the messy GOP infighting from some of North Carolina's recent open statewide primaries. National and state Democrats would likely make it clear to any other potential candidates that if Cooper runs, they should exit the race. Former Representative for the Democrats Willie Nickel, who served for one term before Republicans redrew his seat before the 2024 election, announced a Senate bid in April. 3 freshman congressmen, Representatives Pat Harrigan, Tim Moore, and Brad Knott, could jump into the race on the Republican side if Laura Trump passed on it. So this is very big news if this does end up happening. The 2026 Senate race, which as the article mentioned, has been long thought of the Democrats' best pickup opportunity in 2026. And it depends, because Maine with Susan Collins, Maine is more of a Democratic state than North Carolina is, but this is the best pickup opportunity for Democrats at this point in time. With Thom Tillis not running, the Republicans do lose the factor of the incumbency. However, it is worth noting that Senator Thom Tillis was very unpopular among the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, which is a majority of the Republican primary. So even if Tillis did win the primary, there was a large percentage of the Republican Party that were not thrilled with Tillis, and enough of them may have stayed home that might have ended up costing him re-election anyway. So I actually think that Tillis being the Republican nominee gave the Republicans a smaller chance at winning this general election than Tillis being the nominee. But two things could be true at once. Just because I think whoever the Republicans nominate have a better chance of winning does not mean for sure that they are going to win. Right now, the Republicans have 2 people in the race, Don Brown, attorney, author, and candidate for the 8th District in 2024, and Andy Nielsen, a teacher assistant. 2 other Republicans, Brooks Agnew and Licia Subhatu, have filed paperwork to run. However, all eyes right now are on Laura Trump, the former co-chair of the RNC and daughter-in-law of President Donald Trump. If she were to enter this race, she would obviously have the endorsement of the president, of her father-in-law, and several Republicans have already come out and said they would not run in the primary if Laura Trump were to jump in. For instance, Pat Harrigan, whose name has been mentioned as a potential candidate, has already said he will not run if Laura Trump runs. In addition, Michael Whatley, the chair of the RNC who is considering a run, also said if Laura Trump runs, he will not run as well. So Laura Trump would essentially clear the field here if she were to enter this race, and she would likely not have to face a competitive Republican primary. Similarly, on the Democratic side, it's really Roy Cooper's race. If Roy Cooper decides to enter this race, we may see Willie Nickel stay in, we may see him drop out. We'll have to wait and see how that all goes. But either way, Roy Cooper would likely become the Democratic nominee without too much of a problem. U.S. Representative Don Davis from the 1st District has also recently publicly expressed interest in the last few days. He could potentially join this race too, but with Cooper running, I would imagine he would either not enter the race, and if he did, he wouldn't really have much of a strong chance at winning it, given how strong of a candidate that Roy Cooper is. If it really is dependent right now on if Laura Trump decides to get in, because I think on the Democratic side, Roy Cooper is going to jump in this race, and I think he's going to be the Democratic nominee without a doubt. Cooper, who's already clearing a lot of the field here, several Democrats, Mandy Cohen, Sarah Crawford, Rachel Hint, we have Michael Reagan, Deborah Ross, all of them have said they will not be running if Roy Cooper runs, which is very heavy inclination that he will be running. Jeff Jackson, the Attorney General of North Carolina, who's also thought of as a potential candidate earlier on in this cycle. I think he's more likely to run for Ted Budd's Senate seat in 2028, personally, but he also said in a recent statement that he believes that Cooper is going to be entering the race pretty soon, so he kind of spilled the beans a little bit on that Cooper could be joining it, and he essentially endorsed Cooper if he does there. But regardless, this Senate race was going to be one of the closest in the country, but if it's Roy Cooper versus Laura Trump, I do believe this is going to be the closest Senate race in the United States. Now, this Senate race right now is listed from Inside Elections, Cook Political Report, and Salvador's Crystal Ball as a toss-up. Race to the White House currently has it listed as still Democrat. And it is true here that Roy Cooper, the former Democratic governor of North Carolina, who left office with pretty high approval rating numbers, he starts out as someone with very high name recognition in the state and gives the Democrats a pretty rare opportunity in the state of North Carolina at flipping a Republican Senate seat blue. And you may be wondering, well, why did I say that? Isn't North Carolina very close? It is. But the last time a Democrat actually won the Senate seat in North Carolina, you have to go back to 2008, where the late Senator Kay Hagan won by 8.5% against the Republican Dole. She, in 2014, running for a second term, narrowly lost to Thom Tillis by 1.6%. So coincidentally, the last time that a North Carolina senator was a Democrat is the same Senate seat that Thom Tillis holds that's now going to be up in 2026. So Kay Hagan's old seat could be the same Senate seat that ends up going Democratic in 2026. Tillis won a very close election by 1.6% in 2014, in large part due to third-party vote, with a third-party candidate getting 3.74%. In 2020, Tillis seemed to get lucky again, getting 1.7%, when the Democrat Cal Cunningham only got 46.94%, and this one, two third-party candidates got about 4.5%. So Tillis in both of his elections got under, not even 50% of the vote, but under 49% of the vote, and the Democrat did not have a high enough percentage to win this race. Now, in 2022, we saw Ted Budd, the Republican, break 50% of the vote, getting 50.5%. The Democrat Sherry Beasley got 47.27% of the vote, and that third-party candidate got 1.37%. So you can see in recent elections here, North Carolina has been a lean Republican state at the Senate level. This is why when I see a lot of things online saying, well, this is going to be an automatic flip if Cooper were to run, I'm not 100% sold on that argument, because North Carolina has had a very consistent track record at the presidential and Senate level being a lean Republican state. It was in 2022 for Ted Budd, and even though Thom Tillis was unpopular in 2020 as well, he still won by 1.7%. At the presidential level, 2024, President Trump won the state against Kamala Harris by 3.2%. 2020, where Joe Biden won the election, Trump won it by 1.3%, but that is a lot more narrow. 2016, Trump won it by 3.7%. So that seems like, okay, well, Republicans do very well nationally for president and Senate in North Carolina. Should they be concerned? Well, yes, because in 2024, we saw Democrat Josh Stein defeat Republican Mark Robinson by 14.8%. Now, this was very much a special case, as Robinson had a very bad scandal hit him with a few months to go in the campaign, and there was no chance he was going to win this race. But Roy Cooper, who was elected back in 2016, won re-election in 2020 by 4.5% over the Republican force as a Democratic governor in North Carolina on that same ballot where Donald Trump won by 1.3%. So Cooper is shown in a 2020 presidential election year, Cooper won on the same ballot that a Republican president was elected and a Republican senator was elected. Now, I've said this a lot. Governor's races and Senate races are often very different. It's not always the same. For instance, we can look at the Senate elections with Larry Hogan in Maryland. Larry Hogan did much better than a typical Republican in Maryland in 2024, but still lost in the heavily Democratic state by 11.8%. But he did much better than usual. We can go back, I believe it was 2020, with Steve Bullock and Steve Daines in Montana. The former Democratic governor ran against the Republican senator and still lost by 10 points. He did much better than a generic Democrat did, but he still lost. But there is an exception to the rule here. 2018, Florida, still a very close competitive toss-up state at this time. It had not become the more Republican state we know of it today. Republican Governor Rick Scott decides to challenge Democratic Senator Bill Nelson. And on this one, the argument was on the flip side. Many were saying that Bill Nelson's an incumbent Democratic senator. 2018 is supposed to be a Democratic wave year. There's no way Rick Scott is going to beat Bill Nelson. At the time, one of the earliest videos I did on this channel, I started out in the 2018 midterms. I remember saying Rick Scott, I do believe, is going to narrowly win this race. I thought Florida was more of a trending Republican state at that time, and Rick Scott narrowly ended up winning. I think this is the most direct comparable to North Carolina in 2026, Florida in 2018, where a former governor or governor that's popular or even semi-popular like Rick Scott was at the time is capable of defeating an incumbent senator, but I think it's going to be very, very narrow. However, now Roy Cooper does not have to worry about that. He won a very close race in 2016 versus Republican Pat McCrory by 0.22%. And this is after McCrory was also not too popular going into the election. I believe there was a bill that he signed that a lot of people in North Carolina were not thrilled with at the time, and that opened the door to Cooper winning a very close race. But in 2020, he won re-election by 4.5%, a very sizable margin. What this all means for 2026, in my view, is that this is going to be a very competitive race in North Carolina. So much so that I am now calling it the most competitive race in the United States in 2026. Roy Cooper is going to get Democratic turnout for a Senate race that we have not seen in a very long time. I don't think the governor maps are going to be a direct comparison. I just don't think governor maps and Senate maps really translate that way. But we're going to see Senate turnout for Democrats in North Carolina we have not seen in a while. This is the first opportunity since 2008 where the Democrats could legitimately have a Democratic senator. And the Democrats are going to be very energized to get out and vote for him. While at the same time, many online are knocking the idea of Laura Trump being the Republican nominee and saying that would be a mistake. I actually disagree on that. I think Laura Trump being President Trump's daughter-in-law, it will look like that President Donald Trump is trying to hand his daughter-in-law a Senate seat, but as voters in North Carolina get to know Laura Trump, I think they're going to like her the same way they did with Ted Budd, a lot of the same policies as Ted Budd, where he ended up winning by about 3 points. I think you're going to see something similar happen with Laura Trump on that one. So this race, I don't think is going to be a blowout for Cooper or for Trump. I think it's going to be a case of a very strong, formidable Republican going up against the strongest, most formidable Democrat in the state of North Carolina. What happens? I think this has the potential to be the most expensive Senate race in the history of United States elections, without a doubt. We're going to see national Democrats and Republicans, including possibly the president, come in and do rallies and campaign events in North Carolina, desperately trying to keep this race. And when everything is said and done, I think the margin of victory not only is going to be under 1% of the vote, I think the margin of victory, like with Florida in 2018, is going to be under 0.5% of the vote. I think it's going to be that close, and I do think Roy Cooper right now actually narrowly ends up flipping this seat. And the reason being, in large part, is everything is going right for the Democrats for this to be the possibility here, given the fact that North Carolina, in my view, is much more of a lean Republican state at the national level than a Democratic state. But the 2026 national environment is supposed to be a Democratic-friendly midterm year, and Roy Cooper is so uniquely strong of a Democratic candidate that if it was any other Democrat, if it was Willie Nickel, if it was Don Davis, even if it's Jeff Jackson, I have this race going tilt Republican for Laura Trump. But in this scenario, Roy Cooper as the Democrat, I think the Democrats narrowly win this race by under 0.5 percentage point and actually flip the seat from red to blue. Something that's very hard to imagine now, but after Election Day could make a ton of sense. And in large part, it's due to the fact that Cooper is an A-plus Senate recruit candidate when you look at the candidate quality metrics. Former popular governor with high approval ratings. Got reelected twice on the same ballot that President Trump won re-election, so voter turnout was high. Yes, Laura Trump being the Republican nominee, having the name Trump, would give higher voter turnout than a standard midterm year in all likelihood, but President Trump won't be in the top of the ballot to help out. Depending on how the president is doing with his approval ratings as well, this may make the margin of victory even greater for Roy Cooper if the president is having problems. So right now I have the race listed as still Democrat under 0.5 percentage point. I'm not sure I'm going to change from that rating, but we're going to have to wait and see how this all goes. This is going to be a very close Senate race no matter what, but the Democrats getting Roy Cooper to potentially run is perhaps the best they can do. The Democrats are landing top-tier candidate after top-tier candidate going into 2026, and Republicans right now are kind of playing catch-up in that category. But we'll have to wait and see how it all goes. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And also make sure to leave your thoughts and comments below about the Senate race. Who do you think will win? Who do you think the Democratic and Republican nominees will be? Do you think it'll be Cooper and Laura Trump, or do you think it'll be someone else? Make sure to leave that all down below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about the state of South Carolina, where the Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, Pamela Evette, a Republican, plans to make a special announcement next week. And all indications are that she'll be entering the governor's race for the 2026 elections. Now, I am recording this before she officially enters this race. I'm recording this on Friday, July 11th, so I will not know the official announcement, but I'm very confident she will be joining this governor's race, so I'm deciding to do the video now. South Carolina's lieutenant governor, who's been expected to enter the governor's race, is set to make the official announcement early next week. Pamela Evette's announcement is scheduled for July 14th at the smokestack at Judson Mill in Greenville, South Carolina. The invitation was not clear about the reason for the announcement, but Evette has been considered a likely candidate for the race to succeed Governor Henry McMaster. If Evette were to announce her campaign, she would be joining a Republican primary field that includes current South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson and upstate Senator Josh Kimbrell. McMaster, the longest-serving governor in the state's history, rose to the role from lieutenant governor when then-Governor Nikki Haley stepped down to serve as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations during first President Donald Trump's administration in 2017. After he completed her term, McMaster was then elected to full terms of his own. An early poll conducted back in March gave Evette a slight edge over other Republicans considered at the time to be likely gubernatorial candidates. Evette ended up getting 31% among those surveyed, compared to 27% for Wilson. First District Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who has not officially announced a run but said she was strongly considering one back in January, came in second place at 29%, and then 5th District Congressman Ralph Norman came in at 11%. On the other side, Democratic State Representative Jermaine Johnson recently formed an exploratory committee for a possible run for governor. So this is very interesting. South Carolina is not usually a very competitive state at the general election part, but the primaries could be very interesting here. And with Josh Kimbrell and Alan Wilson currently in this race, the idea of Pamela Evette entering this race makes it even more competitive, because then it would be Evette, the lieutenant governor, going up against Alan Wilson, the South Carolina Attorney General, who you could argue, after the governor, is the two highest name recognition positions you could hold in South Carolina in the politics or in the state office, lieutenant governors and attorney general. It is also interesting, noting that Nancy Mace has been going after a lot online at Alan Wilson, the South Carolina attorney general, in anticipation of her likely governor bid as well. So this has the potential to get very, very interesting here. And Pamela Evette, who's not officially joined as of the time of recording this again, as I mentioned, does have the endorsement of Karen Floyd, the former chair of the South Carolina Republican Party. Two polls that have been done so far for the Republican primary, one from Trafalgar back in March, showed Evette leading at 31%. That same poll, as the article mentioned, had Mace at 29, Wilson 27, and Norman at 11, with 2% undecided. So a very close race to start out, but Evette does lead in that regard. In the first Tuesday Strategies poll, another Republican-sponsored poll from March, shows a lot more undecided vote at 47%, but in this one, Alan Wilson has 21%, Nancy Mace has 16%, Evette has 7%, and Ralph Norman has 6%. So this primary is still very much wide open and very close, and likely, if President Trump were to make an endorsement in this race, would likely pick whoever ends up winning, given how close it is. If President Trump, however, decides to stay neutral and not endorse in this primary could go down literally to election day without having a clear favorite in this race if Evette, Mace, Norman, and Wilson all join. Because the early polling shows this is a very close, under the margin of error primary to start off with so far. So this could be very interesting to see how this all plays out. On the Democratic side, Jermaine Johnson, the state representative from the 70th district, is the only Democrat formed an exploratory committee right now, and will likely be the Democratic nominee unless someone else hops in. But Cook Political Report, Inside Elections, and Saddle Crystal Ball all have this race listed as solid Republican or safe Republican. Race to the White House has it listed as likely. And when you look at the election history for South Carolina, it makes a lot of sense. Looking at the presidential race in 2024, Donald Trump just won it by 17.9% against Kamala Harris in a very big blowout victory. So a safe Republican state in that regard. Back in 2020, it was a little bit more competitive. Trump won the state by 11.7% against Joe Biden. In 2016, Trump won the state by 14.3% against Hillary Clinton. So 2024, this is actually the reddest South Carolina has been in the last 3 presidential elections, and the most red it's been going back even in 2012, where Romney won it by 10.5%, McCain won it by 9 points in 2008, and then Bush won it by 17 points in 2004. So 2024 was the most Republican South Carolina has voted since 2004 with George W. Bush. At the governor level, it's been pretty similar. It voted for Henry McMaster for re-election for a second term in 2022 against the Democrat Cunningham by 17.4%. Henry McMaster getting 988,501 votes, Joe Cunningham getting 692,691 votes, 58% to 40.7% or so. Going back to 2018, Henry McMaster won here in a more of a competitive election, a likely Republican victory for McMaster by 8 points. Here, McMaster got 921,784, or 921,342 votes, to the Democrat James Smith 784,182. In this one, McMaster got 53.96% to James Smith's 45.92%. Now, 2018 was a very strong Democratic wave year, and 2026 is supposed to be a similar election environment. The question will be, do the Democrats do well enough to match the margins of 2018, where nationally, Democrats ended up winning the national governor vote by about 3%, they ended up winning the House vote by about 8.4%. Can the Democrats reach those heights for 2026 remains to be seen, but if they could, that could show maybe South Carolina could be more competitive at the governor level than it has been historically. At the Senate level, it's also interesting because Senator Tim Scott won re-election in 2022 by 26 points, a very large margin. But Senator Lindsey Graham, who in a lot of approval polls is not very popular, he only won against the Democrat Jamie Harrison by 10.3%. And what coincidentally was also the most expensive Senate race in U.S. history at the time, Jamie Harrison and Lindsey Graham set the U.S. fundraising record for this Senate race. It's possible South Carolina can have an under 15% margin of victory for 2024. But it's really contingent on the national election environment being so anti-Republican and pro-Democrat that could happen. In 2022, for instance, it was about an even split. Democrats won 49.3% of the national governor vote. Republicans won, I believe, about 49.05%, so about 49.1%. So roughly about 0.25%, separating the Democrats and Republicans at the 2022 national vote. So going up to the 2018 levels of Democrat plus 3 is a very big difference. However, there are some differences from 2018 than in 2026. In 2018, Republicans had governors in Maryland and Massachusetts. That will not be the case in 2026. Those have both gone Democratic now. However, there's also a Democratic governor in Kansas, in Nevada, and that likely will not be the case in 2026 either, as there's already a Republican governor in Nevada and likely will be a Republican governor in Kansas. So the numbers may not be the exact same in terms of national percentage vote, but it is possible we could see a potential shift in the governor's race in South Carolina. If we compare it, we can shift the map a little bit here. Let's just say we shifted about 5 points towards the Democratic side. This would be Democrats doing better than the expected numbers. If that were to happen, South Carolina would fall under 15% margin of victory and put it into the likely Republican category. So if the Democrats go from winning the national governor vote by like 0.2% to Democrat plus 5, which would be better than they did in 2015, that would be indicative of them getting a more close result in South Carolina than from 2022's election results based on that for 2026. Will that happen? Will the Democrats win the governor map by 5%? I'm not so sure because there's more Republican incumbents and Republican pickup opportunities, like I mentioned, in Nevada and Arizona, Kansas, Michigan, Wisconsin. It's possible there won't be as many Democratic incumbents either. For instance, Gretchen Whitmer won't be running again in Michigan, so that margin of victory will likely be smaller. So the national margins may not line up, but could South Carolina be under 15%? I would say so. I would say it's certainly possible that could happen in 2026. Right now, though, at this point in time, I did have South Carolina as safe Republican in my most recent governor election prediction, and I am going to leave that as safe Republican until we get anything out of the governor's race that says otherwise. Maybe more national generic ballot data or polling data out of South Carolina showing a more competitive race could change my view or opinion on that. But right now, I think this starts out as safe Republican, whoever ends up winning this Republican primary. However, the question is, which Republican ends up winning that primary? Well, that's starting to get very interesting, as 2 Republicans are already in the race. Pamela Evette would make it 3, and potentially Nancy Mace or Ralph Norman could make it 4 and 5. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts. Also, make sure to stay tuned, as I post several videos like this one every single day, so you're not going to want to miss those. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video.